Instead of dwelling upon the nature of action, he describes its characteristic traits. 40. Since selfless action neither wears out the seed from which it sprang nor has any adverse consequence, even a partial observance of this dharma liberates one from the dire terror of repeated birth and death. In the performance of action without coveting the fruits thereof, the initial impulse or the seed is not destroyed. It also does not give rise to any evil. So selfless action, even though done in small measures, frees us from the great fear represented by birth and death. That necessitates reflecting over the nature of such action and walking at least a few steps along its path. Worshippers who have renounced the vanity of earthly possessions have trodden this path, but so can those who lead the life of householders. Lord Krishna tells Arjuna to just sow the seed, for the seed is never destroyed. There is no power in nature, no weapon, which can destroy it. The material world can only cover it up momentarily and hide it for a while, but it cannot wipe out the initial inspiration, the seed, of the act of spiritual accomplishment. Vesnif Majuh Nahabi 66 Yatharth Gita. According to Lord Krishna, even the gravest of sinners can doubtlessly cross over by the arc of knowledge. He means exactly this when he says that if the seed of selfless action is just planted, it is imperishable. It does not even have any adverse outcome in so much as it does not abandon us midway after showing us how we can progress towards spiritual attainment. Even if we give it up, it works doggedly on for our final liberation. This is why selfless action, even in a small measure, provides freedom from the great dread of birth and death. Once planted, even after repeated birth, the seed of such action takes us to the realization of God and to emancipation alike from pleasure and from pain. The question is what we have to do if we choose the way of selfless action. 41. On this auspicious path, O Kurunandan Arjun, the resolute mind is one, but the minds of the ignorant are divided and many. The mind which is earnestly and firmly oriented to selfless action is unified. Selfless action is only one and its outcome is also one. Spiritual accomplishment is the only true achievement, the gradual realization of this attainment by fighting against forces of the material world is an enterprise. This enterprise and resolute action, with a single goal are also one and the same. Then what about those who propagate more than one mode of action? In Lord Krishna's view they are not true worshippers. The minds of such men are endlessly divided and that is why they conjure up endless ways. Jujan Vyavas, Chapter 2, 67, 42-43. Desire-ridden men, O Parth, who are given only to listening to Vedic promises of rewards for action, who believe that the attainment of heaven is the highest goal of temporal birth and its activities, and who speak pretentious words to describe the many rites and ceremonies that they regard as conducive to the achievement of worldly pleasure and power, are ignorant and bereft of discernment. The minds of such men are riddled with endless dissensions. Covetous and attached to the tempting promises made by Vedic verses, they regard heaven as the most sublime goal and they believe in nothing beyond this. Such ignorant men not only devise numerous rites and ceremonies, the performance of which is expected to bring such rewards as the next birth, sensual enjoyment, and worldly dominion, but also flaunt them in flowery and affected language. To put it differently, the minds of men without discrimination have infinite divisions. They are addicted to precepts which promise fruits of action and accept the pledges of the Ved as final and authoritative. They regard heaven as the highest goal. Because their minds are split by many differences, they invent numerous modes of worship. They do speak of God, but behind the cover of His name they build up a whole multitude of ritual ceremonies. Now, are these activities not a form of action? Lord Krishna denies that these activities are true action. What then is true action? The question remains unanswered at this point. For the time being, Lord Krishna only states that ignorant minds are divided minds, because of which they formulate an unlimited number of rites and ceremonies that are not real action. They not only expound them but also give utterance to them in figurative language. Let us now see the effect of all this. UF 60 Yatharth 44. Delighted by ornamental words and attached to worldly pleasures and dominance, men without discrimination have irresolute minds. Minds which are affected by the tempting words of such people are also corrupted, and they also fail to accomplish what is worthwhile. The people whose minds are enamored of such words, and who are attached to sensual enjoyment and temporal power, are deprived of their capacity for action. They are bereft of resolve for the true action that is a prerequisite of contemplation of the worshipped God. But who are the people that lend their ears to these unwise men? Of course, rather than being knowers of the self within and the Supreme Spirit without, they are the ones who are addicted to sensual pleasure and temporal power. The minds of such men are lacking in will for the action that is needed for the ultimate union of the self with the Supreme Spirit. What exactly is the meaning of the assertion that they, too, are mistaken who are blindly devoted to Vedic pronouncements? Lord Krishna speaks about this. 45. Since all the Ved, O Arjun, only illumine the three properties, you should rise above them, be free from the contradictions of happiness and sorrow, rest on that which is constant, and be unconcerned with getting what you do not have as well as with protecting what you have, in order to dedicate yourself to the self within. The Ved only illumine the three properties of nature, they know nothing of what is beyond them. So Arjun should go beyond the sphere. Yiziwu and Omyo Boga, Chapter 69. Of action laid down by the Ved. How to do this? Lord Krishna advises Arjun to liberate himself from the conflicts of joy and sorrow, concentrate on the one changeless reality, and desire neither the unobtained nor the obtained, so that he may devote himself single-mindedly to the indwelling self. This is how he can rise above the Ved. But is there any precedence of anyone going beyond them? Lord Krishna says that as a man transcends the Ved, even so he comes face to face with the Supreme Spirit, and that the man who is aware of him is a true Vipr, a Brahman. 46. After the final absolution, a man does not need the Ved, just as we do not need a pond when there is the all-stretching ocean around. When a man is surrounded by the ocean on all sides, he has no use for a pond. Just so, a Brahmin who has gained knowledge of the Supreme Spirit has no use for the Ved. That means that the one who knows God transcends the Ved, and that man is a Brahmin. So Lord Krishna counsels Arjun to rise above the Ved and be a Brahmin. Arjun is a Kshatriya and Lord Krishna is exhorting him to be a Brahmin. Brahmin and Kshatriya are, among others, names of qualities that are inherent in the dispositions of different Varn, or what are now more commonly known as castes. But the Varn tradition is originally, as we have already seen, action-oriented rather than a social provision determined by birth. What use has he for a petty pond who has availed himself of the crystal current of the Ganga? Some use a pond for ablution, while others wash their cattle in it. A sage who has known God by direct perception has the same kind of use for the Ved. They are undoubtedly useful. The Ved exists for stragglers who lag behind. Further elucidation of the problem begins from this point. Subsequently, Lord Krishna expounds the precautions to be observed in the performance of action. Uajival and Gohi, Li Jivi, Yavan, 7, Yathar, 47. Since you are entitled only to the performance of action but never to the fruits thereof, you should neither desire rewards of action nor be drawn to inaction. Arjun, Lord Krishna says, has the right to action but not to its results. So Arjun should persuade himself that fruits of action simply do not exist. He should not covet these fruits and neither should he grow disillusioned with action. So far, Lord Krishna has first used the term action, karma, meaning both action and its consequence, in the 39th verse of the chapter, but he has not indicated what this karma is and how to perform it. He has, however, described its characteristic traits. A, B, C, D. He has told Arjun that by the performance of action he will be freed from the bonds of action. He has then said that the seed or initial impulse of action is indestructible. Once it is initiated, nature has no means to destroy it. There is, Arjun has been told, not even the slightest flaw in this action, for it never abandons us while we are stranded amidst the temptations of celestial pleasures and worldly affluence. Arjun, to perform this karma, this ordained action, is dharma. Even the least practice of it redeems a man from the cycle of birth and death. But, as it is evident from the summary above, Lord Krishna has not so far defined action. As for the way of doing it, he has said in the 41st verse, the mind which is resolved to do this action is only one and the way of doing it is also only one. Does it mean, then, that people engaged in other multifarious activities are not? Kees and Chapter 2, 71. Really engaged in the worship of God. According to Lord Krishna, the activities of such people are not action. Explaining why it is so, he adds that the minds of men without discernment are riven by endless divisions, because of which they tend to invent an elaborate and unlimited number of rites and ceremonies. So they are not true worshippers. They use pretentious and ornate language to describe these rites and ceremonies. So that man's mind is also poisoned who is lured by the charm of their words. Such persons get trapped in infinite shackles of the cycles of birth and death. The ordained action is, therefore, only one, although we have not yet been told what precisely it is. In the 47th verse, Lord Krishna has told Arjun that he has a right to action, but not to its fruits. So Arjun should not desire these fruits. At the same time, he ought not to lose faith in the performance of action. In other words, he should be constantly and devotedly engaged in its performance. But Lord Krishna has not yet said what this action is. The verse is usually interpreted as meaning, "Do whatever you wish, only do not desire its fruits." That is, say those who interpret the verse thus, what selfless action is all about. In fact, however, Lord Krishna has not so far told